All right, you guys. Today is a bit of a longer topic. We're going to be kind of discussing, how sleep affects testosterone, cognitive function, memory retention, psychological resilience, um, especially things like how sleep deprivation affects metabolism and fitness and all sorts of things. And then we'll go into actually how to you know optimize your sleep so that you don't see these detrimental effects. So, just getting into it, it's really a lot of people think it's a passive thing sleeping, but arguably a lot of these mechanisms are more active when you're sleeping, and therefore it's a very serious thing to hone in and practice. So, I have some sheets down here that I'm going to be referencing. So, anyway, first of all, I think it's a good starting point to talk about circadian rhythm and the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So essentially, your suprachiasmatic nucleus is just a group of neurons connected to your hypothalamus that kind of regulate your circadian rhythm. Essentially, it operates on the input of light and dark signals. So when your eyes pick up light, particularly very very bright light like sunlight, I see a lot of people try to supplement with, if they're inside, they try to supplement with like a very bright desk light. But as far as we know, the best possible thing, even if it's overcast, is outdoor light, just being exposed to it. It does so through these intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells that kind of run from your eyes up through into your hypothalamus, basically. There's a lot of cool stuff mechanistically there that love to talk about in a later video. Um, it's really, what they found is in the morning, exposure to light triggers a little bit of cortisol release, and then it also suppresses your melatonin secretion and production. So, it keeps you alert, and it's really a great thing. Um, Darkness, on the other hand, is going to cause the pineal gland to release melatonin, um, which is, it's a good tool to know that, pertaining to when it's bedtime or when it's, you're ready to fix your sleep, I guess. Um, anyway, it can be kind of a struggle for people who wake up early. Like oftentimes I'll wake up, long before the sun comes up, and again, optimally, I would like to see the sun, but to be honest, it's just not going to happen. I will just, whatever I'm doing, I'll blast my bathroom lights, I'll blast my desk light. Um, Anything of that nature is going to help. So we're just trying to kind of fix what we can fix, and then let go by the wayside the things that we can't really control given our lifestyle. So um, it's a very interesting science behind the actual cycles of sleep. We go through pretty much four main stages. You have your, light sleep. Sleep spindles is the second stage, where you kind of start to consolidate some memory from what we've learned or what we kind of hypothesize. And then you get into, like the deep sleep, where you actually are synthesizing and releasing hormones. And then later on is that REM sleep, or that, I guess you should say, the dream sleep, where you're actually, seeing some horizontal eye movement, and you see almost complete paralysis of the muscles. Um, and anyway, there's a great study by Walker et al. It's from, I want to say, 2017. Let me see here. I think it was 2017. Yeah. Showing that deep sleep enhances your synaptic plasticity, which is directly correlated to learning and memory. So that can be great for not just in the gym, or not just in at work, but for me as a student in class, and for studying for things like the MCAT, for example. That's a big thing that I'm personally dealing with at the moment. So that's kind of my driving force for the time being. Secondly, let's talk about how sleep and testosterone are intertwined, or just hormones in general. But in this case, I'm kind of gearing it towards gym-going men. Anyway, let's just get into it. 60 to 70% of your daily testosterone production is going to happen in that third stage, that deep sleep, the slow wave sleep, you might hear it referred to as, where your luteinizing hormone production and secretion peaks. So luteinizing hormone is a hormone that I believe is made in the hypothalamus and released through the anterior pituitary. And what it does is it goes down to your testicles, into your Leydig cells, and stimulates, testosterone production. It takes cholesterol and turns it into pregnenolone, and pregnenolone is therefore then turned into testosterone. So obviously, if we know that this is occurring in that third stage of deep sleep, missing out on that and disrupting that process is really going to have a major effect on your testosterone production, especially being a natural. It's very, very critical to hone in. There's a couple studies that really I encourage you guys to read. Number one, Leprault and Van Cotter. It's from 2011. Basically showed that like 5 nights of sleep deprivation, where they did like 5 hours of sleep a night, I believe, caused like a 10 to 15% drop in testosterone levels in young men. Chronically, that may not seem like the biggest deal acutely, because it's really not. But chronically, for someone who works early or for someone who struggles to adhere to a proper sleep regimen, that 10 to 15% drop can be detrimental in a multitude of different facets. And then the second study is a lot more recent, from 2022. Reynolds et al. In the Journal of Endocrinology. It's a great one. I really encourage you to read this one if you're going to read any of them. Essentially, it was a study on sleep apnea and how it disrupts your sleep cycles. And by studying this, they showed a 30% decrease in morning test levels. So 30% is pretty significant. I guess not obviously, but in the morning, your testosterone production, or your test, if you took a blood serum sample, it's the highest in the morning, and it kind of decreases throughout the day. This is dependent on your activity and your cognitive state and whatnot, but for the most part, it's going to peak in the morning and decrease throughout the day. So a 30% decrease is very, very significant. I can't remember the time exactly when they measured the levels of test in the 2011 Leprault and Van Cotter study, but if we can take a 30% decrease in the morning, I mean, those levels are going to be significantly lower than someone who's getting adequate sleep and not disrupting these sleep cycles. So that's just another reason, I guess. Thirdly, sleep's role in both growth hormone and muscle recovery is something I wanted to touch on. So growth hormone, I might call it GH, and muscle repair. So production and secretion of GH is pulsatile, and the biggest release of it is going to occur in that third stage of deep sleep, that slow wave sleep. And I think this is a good time to kind of introduce the different, in depth, what these different sleep cycles entail. Stage one is that light sleep, where you're kind of, not alert, but you're more apt to being awoken by your surroundings. It doesn't last long. It maybe lasts on average like 5 minutes or so. And if you took a brain scan, you would see theta waves, to be scientific. But it's from that alertness to a deeper sleep, and you kind of see, at least in studies, they've shown that your muscle activity starts to slow, and you're not necessarily in paralysis. And this is where things like twitching might occur. Like I always see these videos that girls post, like, "Why is my boyfriend twitching?" Like before they go to bed. That's kind of I guess a hallmark thing of that stage. So stage two, following this, you're still in light sleep, but it's noticeably deeper. The brain waves are they're called sleep spindles, or K complexes. It maybe lasts 10. It could last upwards of 25 to 30 minutes. But we do notice that as the night goes on, this stage increases in size. So it might start off at 10 minutes. It might start off at 5. Who knows? But throughout the night and throughout multiple sleep cycles, it does tend to get a bit longer. So we have noted that. This is where you're actually going to recognize body temperature drop, a slowing of the heart rate, and cognitively, this is where memory consolidation starts to become actually done in the brain. And by the end of the night, it's roughly 50% of your sleep is in this stage. So following that, you're going to hopefully have your third stage of deep sleep, or your slow wave sleep, where on a brain scan, this is the delta waves, and it's going to last maybe on average 30 or so minutes. It could be as little as 20. It could be, upwards of 45 minutes, maybe longer. Maybe not that long, but, upwards of 45 minutes. And this is you're getting the most bang for your buck in this stage, basically, where you're actually restoring your body and your brain, repairing your muscle, releasing growth hormone, like we just spoke about. It's very hard to wake up from this stage. So if you've ever been awoken and you just feel, oh man, like, I got hit by a truck or something, you were probably in this stage of sleep. Now, an important thing to note is that this stage is very, very prominent in the first half of the night. So we could, roughly say, if you're on a regular sleep schedule, let's say from, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., if it's somewhere within that range, let's say maybe 10 p.m. to 2:30 to 3 a.m., those stages of deep sleep or the slow wave sleep are going to be much, much more prominent compared to that second half. In the second half, we see a lot more dominance in the fourth stage, which is your dream sleep or your REM sleep. Essentially, you're going to be fully paralyzed, or I believe it's called REM atonia. Let me make sure. And this stage, I'm kind of bagging on it, but it's actually very, very restorative as well. And we see a lot on a brain scan. We see a lot of activation in parts of the brain that are, not even nearly as functioning during consciousness. So it is very interesting. And I don't know if we have studies to show all the effects that it may have, but I think we're onto something there. Hopefully I can maybe analyze a study on that later. And overall, a full cycle is going to last somewhere between like an hour and 10 minutes to upwards of maybe an hour and 30 minutes, an hour and 45-ish minutes, somewhere under 2 hours and somewhere above an hour. So what we can really take away is that the first half of the night is where we really want to focus our effort towards getting good quality sleep, because that second half is kind of dominated by those longer REM periods. A typical sleep or a typical night is going to have about 4 to 6 of these cycles. So if we can, go to bed at an adequate time, wake up at an adequate time, we're going to get roughly 4 pulses of that GH and that LH and other hormones, upwards of 6. So there's a lot of great studies on this. One is Finan et al. It's a 2015 study showing that sleep disruptions reduce the slow wave sleep, impair recovery, and negatively affect mood. So like the studies that I brought up previously, we can pretty much hypothesize that this, impaired recovery especially, might be a direct result of, lower testosterone, lower levels of GH, repairing your muscles and going into your, brain elasticity and whatnot, or plasticity, I should say. Excuse me. And then there's a really great article on Very Well Health. I recommend reading it. I'll post all of these in the description. Essentially, it's going to discuss how sleep disruptions fragment sleep cycles. So we see a lot of emotional dysregulation and cognitive impairment in people who get sleep that's kind of fragmented. You might be waking up several times a night, and that's something that is a big red flag. So if you're feeling, inadequate in any of these departments, I would say if you're getting fragmented sleep, try to eliminate that as best you can first, right off the table. Just try to fix that and condition your brain to be able to sleep for a full, 8 hours, 7 hours at least. I would recommend at minimum 7 hours. Anyway, getting back to GH. GH is going to stimulate insulin growth factor, or insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, you'll hear it referred to as, which is really big in protein synthesis and tissue repair and even things like fat metabolism. It's very, very important in. Depriving yourself of sleep is going to reduce that GH secretion by like 50% in some cases. Essentially, you're just going to struggle to recover your muscles. Let's say after you lift or something, you're really going to struggle to repair those muscles. And, if our margin is, we need to get this much better and this much better, and we consistently just get to here or get to here and here, we're not actually going to make any noticeable gains over time. And that's the case for me, at least. I feel like I've plateaued, and I think this is the biggest reason why. It's just because my sleep is so poor, among other things, but I think this is a big one. And with that, if you have decreased GH, your fat oxidation capability is going to be quite significantly poorer. And I'd love to discuss, a study or do a segment on how decreased sleep, chronically decreased sleep, can really affect your ability to, look your best. Because say you're deep into a cut and you're not sleeping properly, you have severe issues in the tissue that you're actually going to be using for energy, because you're not getting it from food. And you kind of run into this issue where you become skinny fat every time you try to cut, probably because you're not gaining the muscle that you would be if you slept properly while you're maintaining or you're bulking up. And then when you try to cut, you're just going to grab way too much from this tissue that you want to keep on your body, and instead you're just going to leave a lot of that fatty tissue on your body that you'd want to, or I'd assume you'd want to get rid of as best you can. There's a really good study that I say you should read every one of them, but this one's another great one, Kopinski et al. It's from 2020. It's in the Frontiers in Endocrinology. They had these sleep restriction, protocols put in place where the people involved got 5 hours of sleep a night, and it halved their growth hormone secretion, reducing their anabolic processes. Anyway, I'd like to finally talk about, kind of segueing from that, your ability to oxidize fatty tissue for energy, is sleep, cortisol, and fat gain. So this is probably like commonly like, oh, if you sleep bad, like, and you have high cortisol, like, you get cortisol belly and stuff. Like, yeah, but like, let's really discuss this in a level-headed manner, I guess. Versus a lot of people, I think, just blame it on, oh, I have high cortisol, that's why I have this belly. Like, yes and no type of situation. Not to put anyone down, by the way. I think this is just a pretty common, I guess, like a Dr. Oz type of topic. Anyway, cortisol is very, very useful, but it can be very detrimental, especially if you're sleeping very bad. Me, hypercortisolemia, so having heightened levels of it in your blood, is directly associated with increased abdominal fat storage. So having high cortisol is going to increase lipogenesis, so you're promoting triglyceride storage in your belly fat. It's also going to promote things like insulin resistance, so you're going to struggle to take in glucose into your cells, or specifically into your muscle cells. So that's going to just drive up your fat accumulation. And thirdly, it's been shown that having high cortisol is going to pretty much break down your muscle into its base amino acids for gluconeogenesis. That's kind of tied into the GH thing that I just spoke about. It's another mechanism, though, where you're attacking your muscle for energy versus your fatty storage, which of course, you'd want to have decreased fat. As I sip on this caffeinated drink that's going to stimulate my cortisol release. And there's some great studies here as well. Spiegel et al. From 2004, from the Annals of Internal Medicine. They found that sleep-deprived individuals, for one reason or another, were consuming on average a 300-calorie surplus compared to their adequate sleep partners. They hypothesized, or they kind of concluded, that this is likely due to elevated ghrelin and reduced leptin. So leptin is something that's going to make you feel like you're satiated, and ghrelin is something that's going to signal like, oh, I'm hungry. Or same with anorexia. People who are anorexic, they don't have anorexia, they're not very hungry. That's a big topic, though. I don't really want to generalize that. And then Capuccio et al., I believe in 2010, in the Sleep Journal, people who slept less than 6 hours a night had a 48% increased risk of obesity. Now, I know this is a general thing, and we're not talking about the root causes of why these people are becoming obese, but if we can take this somewhat general information and say, okay, here's a bad thing due to this, I'm going to steer clear of this. We don't need to know necessarily, oh, it's because of this, it's because of, increased ghrelin. Let's just steer clear of it, because we see all the signposts point towards, ooh, this is probably not going to result in me getting bigger and losing fat and feeling good, But I guess to put a bow on it, sleep is very, very critical for your hormone production, muscle recovery, your fat loss, even, your cognitive abilities, which people kind of downplay. But arguably the most important thing that you can do when regulating your sleep is having a better, ability to soak up information. If for no other reason, you can read more studies and then fix your habits. Huh? I don't know. But issues for me particularly revolve around, I use my phone before bed. I think everyone is guilty of this to a degree, unless you're perfect, which we are all striving to be. Obviously, we talked about how, light exposure is going to stimulate cortisol release and inhibit melatonin release from your pineal gland. And we want to have maybe about an hour or so. A lot of people you'll see online, people will say, about an hour or so before bed, get off your screens. That is unrealistic, especially to begin a process like fixing your sleep and having good sleep hygiene. So if we can even just be mindful of 30 minutes before we plan to go to bed, what I would recommend is have a journal or have something of the sort. Excuse me, there's a plane flying overhead. And put the phone down when you're, thinking it's time to go to bed, and then plan your day out from the second you want to wake up until the end of the day. And throughout that time, you're probably going to spend, 15 to 30 minutes, if you're getting really into it, off your phone, and you're doing something that's, still activating your brain, so you're not just bored and letting your brain run wild. You're focused, but you're allowing melatonin secretion to actually occur and thus make you more sleepy and more apt to getting deep sleep in that first half of the night. And that kind of segues into my next point is that let's say that you know you're going to be low on sleep for the night. Let's say, I don't know, you're going to have a very early morning. Let's say you have to wake up at 4 a.m. That's okay. Let's try not to do this chronically. It can be done. We can still optimize that if you have to wake up at, say, 4 a.m. every morning. But if you know that, let's not just say, oh, well, I'm screwed. I'm going to go to bed at midnight and just get 4 hours of sleep. And, sometimes it feels good because it's like I just took a nap. No, let's try to get sleep between the first half of the night, and the earlier the better, because it's been shown that that earlier stage of sleep is where you're actually getting the best, deep sleep, where you're getting restorative benefits from the sleep and not just kind of being in a catatonic state, essentially. So, I don't know. I can't really think of a scenario where, if you're, let's say it's Friday night and you go out and you want to party and stuff, and you maybe need to be up to do something on Saturday. Let's try not to just say, oh, I can push XYZ back on Saturday, or I'll just sleep in type of deal. Cut it off early. Go to bed as early as possible and at least try to do damage control on when this happens. Go to bed as early as you can. Ideally, for me, I would say like 10 p.m., maybe 11 p.m. at the latest if you're doing this damage control type situation. And wake up at the same time. If you're waking up at 6 a.m. on your weekdays, do the same thing. It's not a matter of, okay, I can finally sleep in, it's the weekend. Let's try to say, okay, I'm going to get phenomenal sleep because I have no true obligations and I can let my mind rest for a little bit. Let's try to go to bed if you can even crawl in bed at like 7 or 8, especially in the winter when it's dark, that might be phenomenal for your sleep and help you become very, very much, have increased muscle, decreased fat, enhanced cognitive abilities. Like that type of stuff is priceless in my opinion. But we all struggle with it, so there has to be a concerted effort to, or like I shouldn't say that, but there has to be like a true effort to be mindful of these things. So let's do things one at a time, and let's have these gradual behavioral shifts towards, getting a consistent sleep schedule, minimizing the light exposure before bed, whether that be, the red light filter on your phone, which I can show you how to do. It's very simple. Ensuring that we don't eat a huge meal every day before bed. Let's just make slight changes every single week or so until we're getting a pretty optimal schedule. And there's a point of diminishing returns here. Like if you're checking the boxes for 80% of these things, you're probably not even going to feel that big of a difference between, getting super hypercritical of the last couple things that you could do to have better sleep. Like, it might even be detrimental to your sleep at that point because you're just stressing about it. So I would say just gradual behavioral shifts over time. Things like sleeping with the thermostat at a low temperature, things like that can be great, and you just switch it just like that. I would just encourage, go online, find a sleep checklist. Just try to check those boxes over time. And please read those studies, they're great. You can print out a study and read it before bed and probably fall asleep before you get done with the abstract. So yeah, anyway, I'm at about 30 minutes, so thank you, and I apologize if I sound sick because I am. But hopefully I'll get over it soon. Thanks, guys.